When I was a teenager, I had a girlfriend who had a poster in her room that said, "Boys are smelly, throw rocks at them." I remember seeing that poster and immediately thinking, yeah, absolutely. Boys are smelly, throw rocks at them. Fast forward a few years, I'm 21, 22 years old, and a friend of mine, who's a lesbian, was complaining about men in some way, something that men do. And I remember very viscerally saying, "Ugh, men!" And she told me recently that she clocked that away as a weird thing for a cis man to say. It's been 10 years since then, and I have finally realized that I am a transgender woman. It has taken me far, far too long to realize this. I think I knew a long, long time ago, and I've essentially been putting it off. I think I knew a few years ago when I came out as non-binary, but I also think I knew about 10 years ago, around the time that I said, "Ugh, men." Since coming out as a trans woman a few weeks ago, I've been looking back through all my memories to try and figure out if there was a specific moment where my egg cracked. And I don't know that there is, but there were certainly signs, and certainly things that I knew about myself for a very long time. And I think that when I was 22, there were specific things that happened. But there were also signs from before then as well, from when I was a teenager, and maybe even before that. So here's a list of things that should have tipped me off a long time ago. The first one is something that has grown since I was a teenager, which is my obsession with women's rights. I'm a socialist. I'm a very far left-wing person, and that means I have an obsession with multiple areas of social justice. I worry every day about homelessness and hunger. I try my best to be an anti-racist, an anti-fascist. But the two areas of social justice that I am obsessed with are women's rights and trans rights. Women's rights, feminism, these are things that I've obsessed over since I was a teenager. I have always tried my best, and of course failed many times, as so many of us have, to be a good feminist. But this is an obsession that I've had. And it goes beyond just caring about women's rights. I take it personally. And over the last 5, 6, 7 years, I have grown obsessed with trans rights, worrying so much about the rights of trans people, the safety of trans people, and the growing wave of transphobia across the Western world, especially in the UK where I live right now. One thing that's interesting about how my attitude has shifted since coming out is that I used to, until very recently, get angry at transphobia. Now I am more concerned with just living my life as a trans woman. I've gone from outward anger to inward love. There's been an interesting emotional shift there. But the fact that I was so serious about these two topics for so long told me everything I needed to know. The next one is that I have taken several opportunities since the age of 18 to dress up as a woman for Halloween. And not just dress in drag. I am not talking about drag. I'm talking about the fact that I would wear my girlfriend's clothes, or if I didn't have one at the time, I would go to a shop and buy a set of women's clothes. I would buy a blouse and a pencil skirt and a cheap makeup palette, and I would just dress as a woman. My costume was woman. This is probably problematic. I don't know. That's not really the point here. The point is just me trying to unpack all of this stuff. See the signs that I missed so long ago. Another one that's kind of subtle is an obsession with my hair. I've had a fear of going bald all my life. The idea of losing my hair is crippling. Whether my hair has been long or short, I have always obsessed over it. It's always been a thing that has so tied itself up, if you pardon the pun, with my personality, with my sense of self. My hair is very much a part of who and what I am. And I think that there is something feminine in that. And of course, so many of the things I say here, and this is one of them, these things can be stereotypical. Some of the things that I say here, I'm sure will be weaponized by transphobes who are furiously typing in the comment section right now. This thing doesn't define a woman, this isn't what a woman is, while never being able to pin down exactly what a woman is. But I'm not worried about them. The point is that there are maybe stereotypical things about womanhood that I have obsessed over internally, and one of them is my hair. I'm proud of my hair, I'm attached to it, I love it, I take care of it, my hair is part of what and who I am. This one is maybe the biggest one, and that is a fear of men. I have been afraid of men all my life. As a kid, I feared generically masculine things. I was afraid of being forced to play sports with other boys, team sports like football and rugby. I remember a teacher offering for me to play netball with the girls. That was the girls' sport because I didn't want to play football with the boys. And I liked the idea deep down. But then I was sort of ashamed and embarrassed because I was a little boy. I couldn't play with the other girls. That was bad. That was embarrassing. That was naughty. That was a taboo or something. Kind of wish I'd done that though, back when I was, 7 or 8. But beyond that, I've always just feared men, masculinity. Just yesterday, I was in McDonald's. I went to see a play with my girlfriend. When we came out, we were hungry and we went into McDonald's. And it was just full of very, very rowdy men. And they all looked the same and they were all intimidating and scary. And I just felt so much fear. I've always been afraid of men. Last year I read Vivek Shreyar's book, I Am Afraid of Men. She is a trans woman. And that book really hit me hard. She highlighted all of the things that make her afraid of men. And some of them overlap with reasons why cis women are afraid of men. Sometimes it's why gay men are afraid of men. But a fear of masculinity is a thing that has run through my entire life. Men intimidate me, men frighten me. I don't like being around men in general. And good men right now watching this are not going to take offense at that. Good men are going to understand where I'm coming from when I say all of this. And if you're a cis man who's typing in the comments section saying there's nothing to be afraid of, you're not paying attention. Maybe you're part of the problem. I don't know. But this fear of masculinity even became internal. I never put it into words before, but there's something in me that has always felt like the testosterone in my body was poisonous. Like I shouldn't have anything masculine in me. And again, I'm stereotyping. These are things that came into my head when I was a teenager, when I was young, whatever. A lot of what I'm saying here could be weaponized, and I could be labeled as problematic or whatever, but I'm trying to just work through my thoughts, my memories, my feelings from the past and the present. I remember liking a lot of things that were stereotypically girly when I was young, and knowing from a very young age that I wasn't gay. And there was a narrative when I was growing up that if you were a boy who liked feminine things, you were probably gay. That was just a stereotype, that was a narrative, that was what we said. But what happened if you weren't? I mean, you could just be a boy that likes girly things, sure. But it was definitely a sign for me, a very early sign, that I was a trans woman. When I was about 18, I got really, really into comic books. The Dark Knight came out in cinemas just before I went off to university. And then all I wanted to do was buy and read all the Batman comics. I really obsessed over Batman. I got into all of the different artists and writers that have worked on Batman over decades. And I was just collecting Batman comics with every bit of spare cash I had. And then, when I was about 21, Gail Simone brought Batgirl back. If you don't know, Batgirl in the 1980s was shot in the spine by the Joker and lost the use of her legs. And she became the person in the chair, the person in Batman's ear, the Oracle, she was called. Then, Gail Simone brought her back, gave her a new costume and a new comic book, and suddenly we had Batgirl again. And all of my obsessions with Batman, Robin, Nightwing, all of the other characters, it all went out the window, and all I cared about was Batgirl. Not just because Gail Simone's a good writer, but because I finally had a female Batman to obsess over. And then there was also Batwoman, who also is a lesbian, and these two characters became my entire life. As a Batman-obsessed person, as a comic book-obsessed person, all I cared about was Batgirl and Batwoman. I was 21. That should have told me a lot. I think I already said that fear of men was the big one, but I think the crack in my egg, if there was a crack, it was Laura Jane Grace. When I was 22 years old, Laura Jane Grace, the singer of the punk band Against Me, came out as a trans woman. I was obsessed with her. I'm saying obsessed a lot. I loved her band. I saw them live. She was a big inspiration to me as a punk kid. And suddenly she came out as a trans woman. And she was doing interviews. And all of it was speaking to me. Her experiences, the way she felt when she was young. The fact that she was once told by her mother that she would have been called Laura, and so she took the name Laura. And I just watched her journey and couldn't look away. Her journey was just speaking to me. At the time, I was a 22-year-old freshly qualified teacher, and I was just reading and watching interviews. I was listening to her album Transgender Dysphoria Blues. I would listen to it in the car and sing along and scream along to it, and maybe cry sometimes. Laura Jane Grace in some way felt like the woman I would eventually become, or perhaps could become. She was, and she remains in a lot of ways, my idol, my icon. A few months ago, my best friend Jess, who runs the Books and Bow website with me, reminded me of that time when we first met when I was 23 and would just talk about Laura Jane Grace all the time. And again, this is something that is definitely considered problematic by some. I once told Jess that I felt like a lesbian in a man's body. And we laughed about this. And the fact that so many times throughout my youth, my late teens, my early 20s, I would develop a crush on a girl that I'd met, only to find out soon after that she was a lesbian. This happened way too many times. Constantly falling in love or becoming infatuated with a girl to find out that she's gay. It kept happening. And the final little thing is the fact that I was just always so jealous of women's fashion. Looking back now, it's because I wanted to wear it. But I remember as a teenager or in my early 20s, being jealous of women's fashion, and the way that I would process that was by thinking that women's fashion was just better and more interesting. And as a young man, as a teenage boy, I wished that men's fashion was more interesting, more varied. Which still remains true. Men's fashion is limiting and quite bland in my opinion. But that's how I framed it. It wasn't that I wanted to wear women's fashion, of course not, no. It was that I just thought that it was a shame that men's fashion wasn't as cool and interesting, varied and diverse and colourful as women's fashion. Now I realise, of course, I just wanted to wear feminine clothes and never had the stomach to do it. There are probably a lot more, and maybe some of those are things that could be considered problematic, as I said. I'm a little paranoid about that, and I'm sure that there are transphobic people watching this, getting angry, laughing. Probably not laughing, they don't laugh, they just get angry. I don't think they have a sense of humour. But I'm trying not to think about all of that as I'm filming this. I'm trying to just think about me, my journey, the things I've realised. Over the last 2 years, I've made a series of videos on my channel about coming out as non-binary. And I look back now and I realise that these were just stepping stones. Coming out as non-binary was me trying to come out as a trans woman step by step. Fear of committing to it, fear of judgment, fear of not being accepted by friends and family, by society in general. And all of that is just internalized transphobia on my part. I have transgender friends, I have non-binary friends. So many of the great writers, artists, actors, content creators, influencers that I follow are trans men and women and non-binary people. And I love them, and I accept them, and I admire them, I look up to them, and I would be crushed to find out that any of them held back out of fear, and yet that's exactly what I did for several years. And when I say that being non-binary was a stepping stone to coming out as a trans woman, I am not invalidating, or at least not aiming to invalidate, the non-binary experience. But the thing is, over the last 6 months, maybe even longer, I have repeatedly talked to my friends about the idea of passing. I was afraid of being clocked in public as a man, wanting so desperately to be seen as a woman. That is not being non-binary. Not to me. That is being a trans woman. When I realized how obsessed I was with being seen as a woman, I had to come to terms with the fact that I was no longer non-binary. Non-binary was not enough for me. That said, I have kept they as part of my personal pronouns. And that's because I still don't like the gender binary. I still don't like the fact that society puts us in the boxes of male and female, man and woman. I still don't like that. I still don't like gendered terms. I wish we had a language more like Finnish or Mandarin, where we have gender-neutral pronouns. That there is no he, him, his and hers, son, daughter, man, woman. I do think that language should be a lot more gender-neutral than it is. I fully believe that. And for that reason, I put they in my pronouns, because the binary pisses me off. That said, and this makes me hypocritical, and a lot of trans people have talked about this in the past, I still want to be seen as a woman. You have to kind of work that out in your brain. As best you can. Make sense of it however you can. I love and cherish non-binary people, and I still feel very connected to the non-binary experience because being trans and non-binary, they overlap. But I am a trans woman. I'm currently on the waiting list for HRT, which could take a long, long time. I have almost fully socially transitioned in terms of how I physically present myself and the name that I use. And at the time of recording, I'm currently undergoing laser hair removal, which is going really, really well, and I'm thrilled with the results. I'm very happy with me. And as I said before, my anger and hatred towards transphobia has morphed into a more internalized love for myself. I am now more concerned with protecting myself, loving and respecting myself, and doing the same for other trans and non-binary people. Rather than worrying about getting angry at transphobes, I want to be full of love and positivity towards myself and my community. Rather than worrying about external bigotry, hatred, bullying, aggression, threats, all of these terrible things. I just want love for myself and for other trans and non-binary people. There you go. I am a transgender woman. And I am so, so happy. Subscribe for books.